Let us pray. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Have any of you ever been in a situation where you are convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you are right? Adamant that you are right, and everyone else is wrong? Nobody? Yeah. If you've got teenagers, right? If so, then you have something in common with Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus was a name that would cause fingers of fear to curl around the hearts of the followers of Jesus early in the first century. Saul of Tarsus was an upright man of God. Saul the Pharisee knew that these Jesus followers, these people of the way, were wrong. And he was the one who would purge them from society, remove them from the synagogues, destroy the very threat that they presented. We meet him for the first time in Acts chapter 7, when we read about the stoning of Stephen. Stephen was the first of 7 deacons chosen to assist the 12. And it is reported in Acts chapter 6 that Stephen was full of grace and power, and did great wonders and signs among the people. And so he attracted the attention of the Sanhedrin, who put him on trial. He was a serious and a growing threat to everything that they thought was right and appropriate in the worship of God. They put him on trial. They accused him of blasphemy. And every word he spoke was the truth. And his accusers had him stoned. They took off their cloaks and laid them at the feet of Saul of Tarsus to prevent their cloaks being splattered in blood. Saul vowed to rid his faith, his religious belief system, of the followers of the way. He would drag women out by the hair out of the synagogues. He would have them killed. He would have men stoned. He would hunt them down. He was, by his own admission, one of the greatest persecutors of early Christians, followers of the way. He believed in the deepest core of his being that his way was the right way. He firmly believed that he knew exactly who was in God's grand scheme of things, what was orthodox worship, belief, right prayers, the right way. He was pious. He was observant. He was highly moral. He fully believed in God. Jews, like the Pharisees, were the good guys going straight to heaven. Everyone else, beginning with that shabby and morally sloppy rabbi named Jesus of Nazareth, well, they were the bad guys. And they needed to be rooted out like a cancer. Saul, not satisfied with the work of destruction that he had led in Jerusalem, applied to the authorities for letters to Damascus, in order to bind all of the disciples of the Lord in that distant city and bring them bound to Jerusalem. And so he went to Damascus. And it is here en route that we find him. The Damascus experience, as we call it, has now become a social idiom. Everyone knows what it means. It is a moment of conversion. A light from heaven flashed around him, and a voice asked Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Saul asks, who are you, Lord? And the voice replies, I am Jesus, and you're persecuting me. I invite you to think about that for a moment. When Saul was persecuting the Jesus followers, Jesus was telling him, wait, Saul, you're persecuting me. And I think this story has a message for us, a warning for us. Just as when we give a cup of cold water to the least, and the least likely, we are giving to Jesus, we must be careful that we do not persecute Jesus. We must be careful that we don't get embedded in what we think is the right way to worship, the right way to pray, the right way to follow God. After all, we should all have Scottish accents, right? Because there is a potential that we may inadvertently become like Saul and persecute. Not by stoning, certainly not with actual stones, but perhaps with words, decrying, minimizing, scorning, whispering against something that is new or different in the ways of worship or spiritual expression. Saul ended up flat on his back and blinded. God got his attention and said, why do you persecute me? Saul pictured the kingdom of God as a members-only club. Not an all are welcome, free for all, come in, you are a part of the family kind of deal. And many of us know the ending of the story. Saul becomes Paul. Saul was recalled. He had been called as a Pharisee and was recalled to a lifelong commitment of proclaiming the free nature of salvation to Gentiles and non-Jews. To the very people that Saul had deemed to be the scum of the earth, worthy only of stoning, Paul was sent. Frederick Buechner so deftly put it. Paul set out as a hatchet man for the Pharisees and returned a fool for Christ. A radical recall. A total recall. Paul had to eat crow for the rest of his days, proclaiming that everything that he had believed once upon a time was bogus, a lie, the opposite of what he now knew to be the truth of grace. Peter was disheartened after the crucifixion and went home to the Lake of Galilee, hoping to pick up the threads of his life that he had left 3 years ago. Do you remember 3 years ago when he was fishing by a lake and a man called him to follow? And that man said, I will make you fishers of men. Do you remember how that had fallen apart? To the point that Peter had denied his Lord not once, but 3 times. No, couldn't even fish anymore. Back in the day, he had been one of the best fishermen on this side of the lake. Now a whole night out there, not one bite. Using all his old tricks, nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then a stranger from the shore shouts, have you caught anything? No, they replied. The stranger said, throw your nets on the right side of the boat and then you'll find some. Well, I kind of imagine Peter, Thomas and Nathaniel were pretty tired after a long night of fishing, casting their nets and pulling them in, casting their nets and pulling them in. The light was just beginning to come up. They were hungry, their bellies were rumbling, and some stranger says, try something new. I'd be grumbling. Who's he? What does he know about fishing? We've been fishing in this lake for centuries. Our generations have taught us to fish. This is the way my father fished. This is the way his father fished. Try something new. Let's just get in the boat and go home. Nothing is working anymore. Try something new. Why don't we have 100 children in Sunday school? Why can't I fill my nets with fish? Why are the pews filled with 300 people every Sunday? Why can't I fill my nets with fish? Jesus said, cast your nets on the other side of the boat. Try something different. They grumbled, I'm sure. What does he know? We've way more experience than that. We've tried that before. We tried the other side of the boat before and it didn't work. Cast your nets on the other side of the boat. So they did. Surprise. Surprise. They caught fish. Peter at once knew who had spoken to them, and he jumped out of the safety of the boat and ran to greet him. This man who once had fleetingly walked on water. Do you remember when Peter walked on water and he took his eyes off Jesus and he started to sink? This man who had denied his master not once but 3 times ran splashing, undignified and not caring to greet his master, his Lord and teacher. And after breakfast, on a beach, eating bread and fish, Jesus asked, do you love me? Peter replied, yes. Then feed my lambs. Do you love me? Yes. Then take care of my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, Lord. Oh, yes, Lord. I love you. Then feed my sheep. Follow me. Feed my lambs. Feed my sheep. Take care of my sheep. 3 times he had denied him. And 3 times he said, I love you. And was commissioned. Feed my sheep. Take care of my sheep. This was Peter's commission, and it is ours. And my friends, sometimes that means casting our nets on a different side of the boat, trying new things. We all have a bit of Saul within us, believing that we are right, that our way is the right way, and we all have a bit of Peter in us too, failing our Lord and denying him. And like them, we are called and recalled time and time and time again. We are commissioned and recommissioned. Grow my kingdom. Cast your nets on the other side. Feed my lambs. Get out of the safety of the boat. You can't go back, only forward. Do you love me? Jesus asks each one of us. Then nourish and care for my flock. Feed my lambs. And remember that you will be led to places that you may not want to go. Peter followed. And when we read his story, we see indeed that he was led to places he did not want to go. Places of persecution and crucifixion. But he followed his commission, and he failed, and he tried again, and he followed his commission. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep, build my kingdom. Follow me.